Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 532, and today's date is December 3rd, 2014, and the title of this episode is Military Assets Are Now Being Put into Place for World War III. Now, we need to realize that the United States government central bankers have been trying to push a war for quite a while, and they're putting everything into place because they understand that the system cannot be sustained for much longer. And what they are doing right now is they are provoking and pushing different countries at different times, and they're hoping eventually they will slip up and make a mistake and something will occur. Now, we can see this happening out in China. We can see the United States has set up a circle around China where they set up many different bases in Australia, in Japan, in Vietnam, in the Philippines, and it's encircling China right now, and a lot of them have missiles on bases. The United States has leased many different bases in this region. 60% of the United States fleet is in that region, and we can see right now this is to contain China. Now, we have to remember, President Obama came out and said, yes, this is to contain China. Now, we see what's happening out in Eastern Europe. We see that NATO is building up forces. The United States is providing them with many different military assets. We can see tanks are being rolled in. We can see jet fighters are being maneuvered into position. We see soldiers are being brought into different countries. And we can see right now that they are definitely containing Russia in this area. We also understand they've set up a missile shield, and of course this missile shield supposedly is in place for Iran, but we all know that this is in place for Russia when the war starts. Now, we understand also that in the Middle East and in Africa, military assets have been maneuvered in these regions, and we can see from all of this and everything that's been going on, this is in preparation for war. Now, what has the United States government central bankers been doing? Well, they've placed sanctions on Russia. They've been blaming Russia for the Ukraine crisis, and as we know, it was the United States and EU who set up the coup d'etat, and of course, Crimea broke apart. They had a referendum. They decided to go with Russia. The southeastern people said, listen, we don't want to be part of this puppet government, and we want to have a referendum too. And of course, no, we can't have this because the bankers paid for the entire country of Ukraine. They wanted the ports in the Black Sea off of Crimea. They wanted the southeastern section of Ukraine, which is huge in manufacturing, produces coal. All they received was the western part of Ukraine, and this is why they created the anti-terrorism forces to go into the southeastern region and take it back. And eventually what they're going to do is they're going to try to get into Crimea. Now, they've been provoking Russia, and we see on the corporate media that as soon as the MH17 plane was shot down, they blamed Russia, then they backed off later. But they never said, oh, Russia didn't do it. They just stopped putting that story out there because they realized there was no proof. They had no evidence, and of course the corporate media never backs anything up with real investigation reporting. They just believe whatever the government puts out there, and they post it on their news organization. And we can see right now that this is all being done to provoke Russia. Now they're placing sanctions on Russia. They've been reducing oil to put pressure on Russia with their economy, and we see that Russia's economy might go into a recession in 2015 because of these low oil prices. And Russia is reporting that this could happen, and we can see that at the same time, Europe is falling apart, which really does seem like a complete repeat of what happened in World War II with Germany. And they put a lot of pressure on Germany. Europe was falling apart. Of course, here in the United States, the stock market was hitting all-time new highs. Meanwhile, people were out of work. There were 10 cities, and eventually the stock market came crashing down. We are seeing the same thing occur right now. Now, out in Greece, we understand that unemployment is skyrocketing, youth unemployment is skyrocketing, and Greece is trying to get out of this whole bailout scenario right now that they've been sucked into, where they have to take on more and more debt. and implement austerity on the people, raise taxes on the people, and right now Greece has rejected its international lenders' demands for tax rises and income cuts next year. Prime Minister said on Tuesday, doing this would be completely disastrous for the country, which has emerged from a deep economic recession. And I don't really think they have emerged from anything right now. It seems like they're still in it. Talks with the EU IMF inspectors have dragged on for weeks without agreement on next year's budget, leaving Athens short of time to wrap up its final bailout review. Speaking at the same conference early on the day, and I'm going to try to pronounce this, the Syriza leader Alexis promised that if elected, he would swiftly scrap the country's EU IMF bailout without waiting for the outcome of talks with lenders. And he understands that as they take on more debt and they have to implement more austerity, the country is going to be put into a deeper recession than it is, and there is absolutely no way out. I mean, once you have all this debt, it cannot be sustained because you don't have the revenue coming in from the people anymore, and they're out of work. No revenue coming in. You need more debt to pay off the interest. It's a cycle that just can't end. I mean, think about a family who's making $50,000 a year, who has about $50,000 worth of credit card debt, and they keep taking on more credit cards. They can't make the interest payments anymore because their salary is still the same. This is what's happening in countries. Of course, here in the United States, it's a little different because the United States has the Federal Reserve, which can create money out of thin air. So it seems like, oh, there's no problems here whatsoever, but we know there is. And we can see right now that Alexis is saying that if he is elected, he'll pretty much get rid of the IMF and stop these bailouts, and he will reverse austerity cuts, including hiking the minimum wage and reinstating the Christmas pension bonuses. And we'll actually have to see how this works out, because as we know, those people who are running for office say a lot of things, and once they get into office, it doesn't seem to work out the way they were talking before they were elected. Now, out in the Eurozone, well, things are not getting better there either. Now, how can they when you have Greece, Cyprus, Spain, Italy, France, we see the UK, Germany, they're all starting to fall apart. Many of the other countries are starting to fall apart as well. And we see the Eurozone business activity growing less than thought last month. A survey showed on Wednesday, suggesting the bloc's economy may contract again early next year. Now, of course, you have to remember the Eurozone was out there, the IMF was out there telling us that, oh, next year the Eurozone is going to grow, it's going to be fantastic, they're going to see great gains, and of course, as we're seeing, this hasn't come true. It hasn't come true in 2013, it hasn't come true in 2014. Basically what we're seeing is a declining GDP. We're seeing a declining of each one of the nations, and we're seeing it start to spread to many more countries. The region is on course to see a mere 0.1% GDP growth in the final quarter of this year, with a strong likelihood of the near stagnation turning to renewed contraction in the new year unless demand shows signs of reviving. And how is that going to happen? Out of thin air, just everything's just going to start to work out and everything's going to revive? I pretty much doubt it. Here in the U.S., U.S. services PMI dropped 56.2. It missed their expectations of 56.5. This is the lowest in 7 months. As market notes, this is a major problem, since whereas the manufacturing slowdown was largely linked to weaker global demand and a renewed fall in export orders, moderating growth in the service sector is a sign of domestic demand weakening. And of course, it is. And we're seeing this across the entire country. We're seeing that things are starting to fall apart. Manufacturing is not doing as well as they thought. Retail is not doing as well as they thought. And we have ADP out there saying that they've missed expectations. This is the worst November in 4 years. November has historically seen a significant bump higher in employment, but 2014 saw a drop. This is the first since 2008, with the lowest November print since 2010. So basically what we're seeing is everything starting to slow down right now, and this is the point in time where things are supposed to really ramp up. The holiday season, we have a lot of people getting employed for the part-time work. We have a lot of people out there trying to spend their money, but we're not seeing any of this. So far, It was reported by ShopperTrack. Then it was the National Retail Federation. Then it was IBM telling us how poor the Black Friday and Cyber Monday was. Now we have Bank of America basically telling us that, yeah, things are not going well right now, and what they're seeing is that the spending on the Bank of American credit and debit cards over Thanksgiving and Black Friday declined by 1.6%. So we're seeing declines all over the place. People are not spending their money. Now, in real estate, we're seeing the same thing. We're seeing prices are starting to come down. Real estate is not doing well like it was, and what they predicted, they thought it was going to be really ramping up, and it's recovering. And of course, the corporate media is still using this, but again, each week we report that mortgage applications are declining. If mortgage applications are declining, retail sales are declining, and people aren't spending during this holiday seasons, how are they saying the housing market is recovering? Well, one thing we do know for sure, that foreign investors are coming in with cash. We also understand the Fed is giving investment companies, hedge funds, free money. They use it with cash only to purchase these rentals. They buy them, they hold on to them, and then eventually they try to get rid of them. And they're trying to get rid of them right now, but they're having a huge amount of problems because what's happening? Well, the American people are completely tapped out. They do not have funds. Applications for U.S. home mortgages fell last week as refinancing applications dropped. The Mortgage Banker Association reported both refinancing and home purchases demand fell by 7.3% the week ending November 28th. And since I've been reporting this coming out of the summer, we have been seeing each week mortgage and refinance applications declining. They are not improving whatsoever. But we have to look a little deeper in the housing market, and we're starting to see signs of what happened prior to 2008. And we're seeing that about 40% of appraisers surveyed from September 15th through November 7th reported experienced pressure to inflate values, according to Altera Group LLC, a for-profit appraiser advocacy firm based in Maryland. The figure was 37% in the survey for the previous year. The Wall Street Journal reports home appraisers are inflating the values of some properties they assess, often at the behest of loan officers and real estate agents, in what industry executives say is a return to practices seen before the financial crisis. An estimated 1 in 7 appraisals conducted from 2011 through 2014 inflated home values by 20% or more, according to data provided to the Altera Group, the firm reviewing more than 200,000 mortgages, parsing the home's appraised values, and other information has shown this. So what we are seeing that pretty much they're inflating the bubble in the housing market. We see now that they're inflating the prices. They're giving free money to hedge fund and investment companies, having them pay for these homes in cash. We are seeing them trying to convince us that retail is right on track, everything is fine for the holiday season, and this little downward declining of sales during Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and Cyber Monday is absolutely normal when you have a recovering economy. Well, no, it's not. If the unemployment number is coming down and we're in the 5.78 range, we should see an increase of sales. I mean, think about it. Last year, where was unemployment? That was in the high 6s. Now it's lower. We're seeing a decrease in sales. So something is definitely wrong. And as we know, the U.S. government, the central bankers have lowered the oil prices, so gas is cheaper, and they're hoping that people take this extra money and go out and purchase this, and this is just not happening. We see it on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. People are not taking their extra money and going out shopping. Actually, most likely, they are pretty much saving or putting more gas into their car, saying, oh, thank God, now I can make it to where I need to go, and I don't have to worry. And we can see all of their plans to keep the economy going is completely starting to fall apart. Now, China They are opening up a second land port in Nepal to boost trade with South Asia. And what they are doing in a major boost for bilateral trade between China and Nepal, a second cross-border trading route has come into operation in Tibet, allowing China to trade with South Asia. China yesterday officially opened a new port on the border of Nepal. Operation of the port means a solid foundation for China to build the South Asia trading area, and it will help to promote trade between China and South Asian countries in the near future. And we can see that China is making deals all across the world. They're making bilateral trade deals all across the world, and they're continually doing this. In the meantime, what is the United States doing? Well, they are maneuvering military assets all over the world. They are pushing war all over the world. They are provoking countries all over the world because the dollar is dying. The entire system is collapsing, and they know this, and the only way out of this is to start some type of war. And of course, they're going to have to use an event of some type to start this. Now, Brazil and Uruguay, they are moving away from the U.S. dollar in trade. Brazil and Uruguay have switched to settling bilateral trade with local currency to stimulate turnover, bypassing the U.S. dollar. Payments in the Brazilian real and Uruguayan peso started on Monday. The agreement was signed on November 2nd by the head of Brazilian Central Bank and Uruguay. The agreement was the result of a long negotiation between the countries as well as the global strategies of the BRIC nations. And we can see right now there are a lot of countries that are moving away from the dollar because they realize they need to protect themselves and make sure they understand and make sure they realize that when the dollar does die, they have other areas to go. They are just protecting themselves. And we see that China, Russia, and a lot of the BRIC nations are completely moving away from the dollar and starting to trade using their own currencies. Now, I talk about Common Core quite a bit, and yesterday I was talking about it. And we were talking about this Chinese woman who lived in China, now here in the United States, is saying that this Common Core is pretty much the same as it was in China, where they're collecting all this data and they're going to use this data and have it follow you along throughout your life. And right now in Pennsylvania, they are really angry, and we can see that in Pennsylvania, they're speaking out against Common Core. They're saying that Common Core pretty much records and collects data on every single student. And what they're saying is that the process set to play out through the country in what critics call a womb to workplace information system was originally developed by the Department of Labor and contains information on every U.S. citizen under the age of 26. Most of the information on individuals is collected while you're in school from K through 12. And includes names, grades, information such as personality traits, behavior patterns, and even fingerprints. The personally identifiable information includes information on every student's personality, attitudes, values, beliefs, disposition, psychological profile called interpersonal skills, standards, and anchors. This data has been illegally obtained through deceptive means without the parent's knowledge or consent through screening, evaluations, testing, and surveys. These illegal methods of information gathering were actually fraudulently called academic standards. There are two problems with sharing data beyond the local district. The parents have said that they are not aware that FERPA, Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, regulations now allow their children's data, personally identifiable information, to be shared to outside third-party vendors. And this data is being collected and placed on data systems that is shared with the feds and corporations. This first level of data collection and sharing is a violation of privacy. The second problem is that the data then becomes a decision-making model. This is where the violations of privacy are expanded for information to be used for interventions. This is a civil rights violation, and of course, as we know, they are definitely collecting this information. They're creating social profiles in every single person because they need to keep track of every single person, and this will follow you around, and this is going to be a huge problem when you try to get a job, or if you're trying to buy a firearm, or anything else, they will look at these records and say, no, look, psychological profile, I'm sorry, you do not qualify. Oh, you wanted to get this job? I'm sorry, in your records it shows you had a bad attitude, so we can't hire you here. And we can see right now all these things that are normally private and not open to corporations, to the government, or other places. They are now being completely open and being passed around, and these are your new social profiles. Now, it seems like the grand jury declined to indict the NYPD officer Eric Gardner on this chokehold death. Gardner, who had been stopped by Pantaleo and several other NYPD officers, including 2 sergeants, on suspicion of selling loose, untaxed cigarettes, was pronounced dead at a hospital. The medical examiner ruled Gardner's death a homicide caused in part by the chokehold. The father of the 3's health issues, including obesity, were listed as contributing factors in the autopsy report. Now, he was a heavy man. He was about 400 pounds or so. The cop was holding him around his neck, and we can see right now this was extreme force if someone was actually selling untaxed cigarettes. And of course, we see that he wasn't indicted. Now, are they using this to fan up more riots across the country to get this going so the president can declare martial law, pretty much suspend the Constitution and control the people? It does seem that way. Now, as we know, out in Hong Kong, the United States had a pretty much pro-democracy Occupy movement going on there. They wanted to pretty much overthrow the government in China. And of course, the Chinese officials realize this. They understand that this is happening. And right now, the founders of the Hong Kong's pro-democracy Occupy movement surrendered to police Wednesday in a symbolic move. We have not been arrested, so we are allowed to leave with no restrictions on our liberty. Tai said the Occupy movement would now take a different approach to promoting democracy, including through education and new social charters. And we can see right now this movement is really not going anywhere. It's not working the way the United States government central bankers wanted it to work, like they did in Ukraine, like they did in Lebanon, in Libya, in Yemen, and many other places, and it just didn't go anywhere. Now, as we know, down in Africa, we understand that United States government is down there, China's down there, Russia's down there, and it seems like Russia now is bringing in more military presence into this area. Now, they had a think tank look at this whole situation, and they realized that the U.S. government is maneuvering military troops into each one of these regions, trying to get into Nigeria, which they haven't. They're moving into Niger, they're moving into Sudan, into Mali, into Chad, into Liberia, into Sierra Leone. And they're trying to get into all these areas because many of these countries have recently had huge amount of oil discoveries in these areas, and they know that China has very close ties and relationships with many of these countries, and the United States government doesn't want them to get a hold of these countries, so they use terrorism, they use Ebola, they use whatever they can to get troops into the area. And right now we're seeing that China is sending a battalion of 700 infantry soldiers to reinforce the mission down in South Sudan, and of course it is to protect their oil investments there and to protect their people. Now, Sri Lanka is out there, and a member of Sri Lanka's ruling Freedom Party, has warned of what he called Western plots aimed at toppling incumbent president in the South Asian country's upcoming presidential election. And again, we've seen this happen quite a bit. If there's natural gas, oil discovered in a country, and they're worrying about China and Russia coming in, the central bankers need to capture those resources. And again, Sri Lanka has had discoveries of natural gas and oil, and we can see right now they are maneuvering to do something in that country. Now, as we know, in Afghanistan, the U.S. is bringing in more troops, and NATO, is supposed to be removing the troops, and actually U.S. is supposed to be removing, but since the bilateral security agreement was signed, we know that this is not going to happen. Right now, NATO wants to extend missions in Afghanistan after 2014. Surprise, surprise. Many of the members of the North Atlantic Alliance are interested in the UN Security Council to adopt a resolution on NATO force deployment in Afghanistan after 2014. Moscow believes that further deployment in this area should be voted on in the UN Security Council resolution, and they should not be allowed to do this. But of course, they're going to pretty much bypass this, and they're going to bring in more troops because, as we know, they're never going to let Afghanistan go. They grow the poppies there, which they then convert into opium, and they sell across in different countries to pay for their covert missions. We understand there's a huge amount of natural resources there: lithium, oil, copper. China is there. Russia is there. It's in a strategic location which borders right against many different countries they'd love to get into, and we can see right now they will never ever leave this area. Now, Switzerland, they are out there and they're saying that they are not planning to introduce sanctions against Russia, but they will do so if the United Nations Security Council does impose sanctions on Russia. So if they do it, they will follow along and go ahead with them. And of course, as we can see so far, we're seeing that Europe, we're seeing the United States, Australia, and many other countries place sanctions on Russia because, of course, they believe that Russia has troops inside NATO, inside Ukraine. They have troops on the border, and as it goes, they never have proof. They don't have those 3D colorful satellite images they can show us of all the tanks, the armored people, the armored carriers. They show none of this whatsoever. They just keep saying, yes, they do, yes, they do. And we have to remember, Russia allowed the United States with the Open Sky Treaty to fly over Russia. They had 96 hours to take pictures, to take a look, and guess what they saw? Absolutely nothing. Back during the height of the Ukraine war, when NATO and the United States was out there saying that Russia is invading, an NBC crew drove up 1,200 miles up and down the border, and guess what they saw? Absolutely nothing. There were no troop buildups, but of course they have to use this propaganda to demonize Russia. Now, we understand that Ukraine and the southeastern people have talked about a ceasefire in the Donetsk airport area, and it doesn't seem like it's going too well there. Kiev security forces have repeatedly violated the ceasefire at the Donetsk airport during the night. We registered about 62 times the ceasefire was violated within a 24-hour period. Of course, Ukraine came out and said that no, it was the southeastern side. They fired a couple shots at us, and we had to retaliate with shelling of those terrorists. And we can see right now the southeastern people were calling for a ceasefire. They didn't hear a response from Kiev because Kiev does not want a ceasefire. They are controlled by the bankers. The bankers didn't get what they paid for, and they want this war to go hot, and this is why they're continually doing this. This is why they're blaming it on the other side right now. I mean, it makes no sense. Why would the southeastern people ask for a ceasefire, then break the ceasefire? Now, it seems that the United States could not get into Nigeria. And of course, we had that whole propaganda of Boko Haram kidnapping 100 girls, kidnapping 100 boys, blowing up colleges, part of the Islamic State. And right now, the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria announced on Monday that the training of Nigerian army battalions would cease at the request of the country's government. The Nigerian government has been our biggest obstacle in countering Boko Haram, coming from the United States official White House source. And again, basically what is happening here, the United States wanted to bring military soldiers into Nigeria. Nigeria wouldn't allow this. Of course, the United States brought in military soldiers into Chad, which borders Nigeria, thinking that eventually, as things got worse, they could say, okay, you know what, yeah, we need you in here and we need your help. But again, Nigeria, very closely related to China. They did not allow the United States in there. The United States was holding off on providing weapons to go after Boko Haram, and right now the Nigerian ambassador said last month that our people are not very happy with the content of American support in the struggle against Boko Haram, citing a lack of intelligence sharing and U.S. weapon support. Now, of course, they held back on all of this because they wanted to get in there and garrison the country like they did in Sudan, Liberia, Chad, Mali, and many other places. Now, Nigeria turned around and they have signed with Russia a memorandum of interaction and cooperation between their security councils. The document is called upon to become a basis for regular dialogue between the sides on different aspects, including the sphere of international and regional security. So we can see right now they're looking to different countries to help them out. They're not going to depend on the United States. Now, Russia, as we know, pretty much canceled the South Stream project, and it was because of Bulgaria. There was pressure being put on Bulgaria by the United States government, central bankers, to not allow this to happen. But Russia is ready to continue talks with Austria, Hungary, Serbia on ways out of the situation that developed as a result of the closure of the South Stream project. Bulgaria right now is the only country that could not resist U.S. pressure over South Stream construction. And this is coming from the former Bulgarian economy minister. Basically, Bulgaria was the only country from all European states through which South Stream was planned to pass that didn't succeed to protect, not even to use its national interest as a position. The former economy minister believes Bulgaria ultimately lost its ability to make independent decisions after the humiliating arrival of a U.S. senator to the country in June. So basically, a government official arrived in Bulgaria, was able to push around the officials in Bulgaria to do what he wanted, or she, and they went along with it, and South Stream was completely killed at this point. Now, President Obama is out there, and he is pretty much talking about what is going on in Russia. U.S. President Barack Obama said on Wednesday he doubted Russian President Putin will change course until politics catch up with the rough economic situation in Russia. And basically, he is trying to tell us that, yes, we're turning the screws on Russia and pushing them and hoping to collapse their economy. Obama said Putin has promoted a nationalist, backward-looking approach to Russian policy that scares neighbors and hurts Moscow's economy. Actually, it's the other way around. The United States is scaring many nations around the world with war, and we can see that many nations are getting nervous and they're seeing what is happening, and a lot of the nations are saying we don't want to be involved in this. We see Russia, China, North Korea, and many other nations preparing for some type of war. Now, in the U.S. House, there will be a debate tomorrow, and they will vote on H. Resolution 758, which is a tantamount to a declaration of Cold War against Russia, reciting a host of grievances, old and new, against Russia, which represent complaints that Russia could well make against the U.S., given our nation's most recent military actions, violating territorial integrity, violations of international law, violations of nuclear arms agreements. The resolution demands Russia to be isolated for the president in consultation with Congress to conduct a review of the force posture, readiness, and responsibilities of the United States Armed Forces and the forces of other members of NATO to determine if the contributions and actions of each are sufficient to meet the obligations of a collective self-defense under Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, and to specify the measures needed to remedy any deficiencies. In other words, let's get ready for war with Russia. And we can see, yes, this is what is going on right now. All military assets are being pre-positioned around the world. We can see it. Look, Lieutenant General Frederick Ben Hodges, who replaced Lieutenant General Donald M. Campbell earlier this month as the commander of the U.S. Army in Europe, said the Army was looking to add about 100 Abrams tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles to the forces in Eastern Europe. And they're on their way. NATO is seeking to deliver these tanks to this area. Now, we have to look back in time, and before the Ukraine crisis and before everything that's been happening right now, this is what NATO looked like in Europe. There were 4 U.S. Air Force F-15 Sea Eagles based in Lithuania. Now, after the Ukraine crisis, what do we see? 4 Eurofighters from Germany based in Estonia, 6 F-16 fighters from Portugal based in Lithuania, 4 CF-18 fighters from Canada based in Lithuania, 4 F-16 aircraft from the Netherlands based in Poland. So we can see right now there is a huge buildup of military assets all around Russia right now. Now, Russia, they do realize that war is coming. They understand. This is why they've been having military drills, flexing their muscles. This is why China has been boosting their military assets all around. And we can see right now, Russia is launching a new national defense facility, which is meant to monitor threats to national security in peacetime, but would take control of the entire country in case of war. The new top security fortified facility in Moscow includes several large war rooms and a brand new supercomputer in the heart of a state-of-the-art data processing center, underground facilities, secret transport routes for emergency evacuation, and a helicopter pad which was deployed for the first time on November 24th on the Moscow River. And if Russia does get into war, the center would act as a major communication hub and form a wartime government, delivering reports to the country's military command and giving orders to all ministries, state-owned companies, and other organizations according to the needs of the armed forces. And you can see right now they understand what is going on. They see it. They smell it. War is coming. This is why all these military assets are being maneuvered and placed into all these different areas. Now, Iran was out there, and of course, as we know, the P5+1 talks are still going on, and Iran has said it provided evidence to the United Nations Atomic Agency showing that documents on a suspected nuclear bomb research by the country were forged and riddled with errors. Basically what happened, there was a document that was introduced saying that, yes, here it is, we found it, Iran is creating a nuclear weapon. Now, we've heard this going back 30 years now, and we have Israel and the United States letting us and reminding us every year or so that they're about 6 months or 3 to 5 months away from creating this weapon, and it's been over 30 years right now. Iran went on to say they are full of mistakes and contain fake names with specific pronunciations, which only point toward a certain member of the IAEA as their forger, it said. It may have been referring maybe to Israel, most likely, with the help of the United States, which have accused Iran of seeking to develop an atomic bomb capability. So we can see right now they're showing the United Nations that these are completely fake. Now, the Pentagon, and I mentioned this yesterday, they're saying that, yes, Iran is out there and they are bombing the Islamic State, but Iran is saying, no, we are not. We have no knowledge of this whatsoever. And basically they're saying, and this is coming from the United States, that they're using F-4 Phantoms in the past several days to bomb the Islamic State. Now, this is very hard to believe right now, and it seems like it's starting to fall apart. Iran is out there saying that they're not involved in this whatsoever, and they're using these very old jets. It seems like this might be some type of setup or to show that Iran is in the area, and we might see some type of incident where they say, yes, Iran was flying a plane. They came very close to the United States. We had to take it down, and this might start something. And we can see this might be propaganda at this point. Now, it seems that Congress is in negotiations late on Tuesday, which will approve an emergency funding package to pay for a military operation against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And you have to remember, the previous plan that President Obama introduced, where they're going to fund the rebels and they're going to go after everyone, ends December 11th. So this will extend the fighting and help fund the Syrian rebels past December 11th, and they're looking to vote on this and pass this. Now, President Assad is out there, and he's saying that all of these U.S.-led airstrikes in Syria have made no difference on the ground whatsoever. The coalition has done absolutely nothing, and we know, and he's continually saying this. Yes, I see the bombing, I see everything that's going on, but nothing is better here. It's actually worse. And we can see, and I put it on the X22Report.com site, you can see inside Syria, and there's pictures there, where the lights have gone out where Syria is going dark. Everything is being demolished. There's no one. Electricity is not flowing. Apartment buildings, houses are destroyed. It is in shambles, and this is all to remove Assad. And for the last couple of years, all these people have been living in fear. And he's saying that for 2 months now, it is not better at all. Now, Turkey is out there, and NATO allies, and Turkey, and the United States, they're saying that they're narrowing their differences over plans to create a no-fly zone along the Syrian border. Now, you have to remember, the United States says we are not ready to do so, not saying that we will never do this, and we can see right now that they are going to do this. They might not call it a no-fly zone. They might call it a different name, but it's still the same. And they're saying that they're getting very close. The negotiations are going well. They're ironing out the differences. And probably in the next couple of weeks, all of a sudden, you will see something pop up. It'll probably be a very small no-fly zone. And then they'll expand it later on, saying that they need to do this. Now, the United States is out there, and they're harping on the chemical weapons inside Syria right now, saying that the destruction of dozen chemical weapons production facilities in Syria is several months behind schedule, and Assad could have the ability of creating chemical weapons once again. And they're still trying to push this along and trying to convince everyone that he's using chemical weapons. And I don't think this story is going to gain traction whatsoever, because as we know, all the chemical weapons were removed. We realize that he's not really using the chemical weapons. It is the Free Syrian Army. It is the Islamic State that's using sarin gas, chlorine gas. We've had proof from MIT going back August 2013 where they did the trajectory of the missile that was carrying sarin gas, and it came from the rebel side. It did not come from Assad's government side. And we see right now that the Islamic State has chlorine gas, and of course they're saying Assad is using chlorine gas. Why would he use chlorine gas during the time period that the inspectors were there? It makes no sense whatsoever. He would not do this. It wouldn't gain him anything. And again, he wants this whole thing to come to an end. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.